In 2021, Disney reached a peak that felt permanent. For a brief moment, the company was valued at more than $260 billion, a number that seemed to confirm what many people already believed. Disney wasn't just the biggest entertainment company in the world, it was a cultural constant, a brand that shaped childhoods, defined generations, and built emotional connections that lasted a lifetime. Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, classic animation, theme parks, merchandise. Disney wasn't simply everywhere. It felt untouchable, but that sense of inevitability didn't last. Between 2021 and 2023, Disney lost more than $100 billion in market value. The stock declined sharply, streaming losses grew into the billions, layoffs followed, and investor confidence weakened. This wasn't caused by one failed movie or one controversial decision. There was no single moment where everything collapsed. Instead, Disney experienced something far more difficult to detect and far more dangerous to fix: a slow, quiet decline. While the company continued releasing movies, launching shows, and expanding its franchises at record speed, something essential was slipping away. The magic didn't vanish overnight. It thinned out gradually until people began to sense that Disney no longer felt the same. For decades, the Disney logo carried a promise. Before the castle appeared on screen and before the music began, audiences expected a certain feeling. Disney stories weren't just watched, they were remembered. Mickey Mouse wasn't simply a mascot. Toy Story wasn't just animation. Hercules wasn't only entertainment. These stories became emotional reference points, revisited again and again, passed down from one generation to the next. Disney understood something many companies never do. Magic comes from restraint. It comes from patience, from care, and from allowing stories the time they need to become timeless. Fewer releases, higher standards, deeper impact. That approach created trust, and trust created loyalty.
The definition of animation is to give life to.
The shift away from that philosophy didn't begin with a bad film. It began with a strategic decision. Disney stopped thinking primarily like a studio and started thinking like a platform. Streaming became the center of gravity for the entire company. Disney Plus wasn't just another distribution channel. It was positioned as the future of Disney itself, a direct pipeline to the audience with unlimited reach and unlimited growth. At first, the strategy worked. Millions of subscribers signed up almost immediately. Wall Street celebrated. The narrative was simple and optimistic. Disney had successfully reinvented itself for a new era, but streaming carried a hidden cost. Streaming doesn't reward patience, it rewards volume. A platform must be fed constantly. New shows, new seasons, spin-offs, side stories, and endless extensions of existing franchises became necessities rather than options. Quietly, the goal changed. It was no longer about making something timeless. It became about making something next. That single shift reshaped everything. Development timelines compressed, budgets grew. Creative risk shrank. Stories that once would have spent years in refinement were rushed forward to meet release schedules. Disney didn't lose talent during this transition. It lost restraint. Marvel films that once felt like cultural events began to feel episodic. Each release no longer carried the same weight or anticipation. Star Wars, once defined by mystery and myth, became increasingly fragmented and over-explained. Even animation, the emotional backbone of Disney's identity, began to lose its sense of rarity. Films arrived, performed reasonably well, and then faded from conversation. Not because they were disasters, but because they failed to leave a lasting imprint. When everything becomes content, nothing feels special. The audience didn't revolt against Disney. There was no mass boycott. People didn't abandon the brand in anger. They drifted away quietly. They stopped rushing to theaters. They stopped rewatching new releases endlessly. They stopped trusting the logo as a guarantee of quality. Disney content became background noise, something watched once and quickly forgotten. This kind of indifference is far more damaging than outrage, because outrage burns hot and then fades. Indifference settles in and stays. The financial data reflected this shift in sentiment. Between 2021 and 2023, Disney's market value dropped by more than $100 billion. Streaming losses reached into the billions on an annual basis. Subscriber growth slowed, then stalled. Disney found itself spending more money than ever before while receiving less emotional and financial return in exchange. Investors didn't panic all at once. They lost confidence gradually, quarter by quarter. Disney wasn't failing spectacularly. It was underperforming consistently, and consistency in the wrong direction erodes belief faster than any single catastrophe. The corporate response followed a familiar pattern. Cost-cutting became the priority. Thousands of layoffs were announced. Budgets were reduced. Projects were quietly shelved. Bob Chapek was removed and Bob Iger returned. But Iger's return wasn't a triumphant reset. It was an attempt to stabilize a company under pressure. Disney was no longer chasing magic. It was trying to stop the bleeding. That shift in focus sent a clear signal internally and externally. The company had become reactive instead of visionary. At the same time, Disney leaned more heavily on nostalgia. Live-action remakes, reboots, sequels, and endless franchise extensions became the safest path forward. The logic was straightforward. If people love something once, they would love it again. But nostalgia is not a foundation. It is a multiplier. It amplifies existing emotional connections, but it cannot create new ones on its own. Without fresh stories that resonate deeply, nostalgia turns into repetition. Audiences don't want to see the same story forever. They want to feel the same sense of wonder they once felt. And Disney began to confuse repetition with emotion. Disney mastered scale better than almost any company in history. Global distribution, streaming platforms, merchandising empires, and theme parks operated at an enormous level. But Soul does not scale in the same way. Soul requires patience, trust in creators, and the courage to do less. Classic Disney took risks. It allowed silence between releases. It accepted imperfection in pursuit of something meaningful. Modern Disney optimized everything, and over time, that optimization squeezed the magic out. This wasn't an industry-wide inevitability. Other studios faced the same pressures and adapted without erasing their identities. Disney diluted its own. Stories began to feel like inventory rather than expressions of imagination. And once a company built on wonder starts treating wonder as output, decline becomes inevitable. Not sudden, not dramatic, quiet, measured in fading excitement, forgotten releases, and a logo that no longer guarantees an emotional response. Disney can recover financially, stock prices can rebound, streaming can stabilize, hit movies can return, but magic does not come back on a schedule. It returns only when a company remembers why people believed in it in the first place. Disney didn't build its empire by being everywhere. It built it by being unforgettable. In the years when Disney was at its strongest, the company didn't try to fill every moment of attention. It understood that anticipation was part of the experience. A new Disney release felt earned because there was space before it. Silence between projects wasn't a weakness. It was a signal of confidence. It told audiences that the company was willing to wait until a story was truly ready. That patience created an emotional bond that went far beyond box office numbers. Streaming disrupted that balance. The demand for constant engagement meant there was no longer room for silence. Every gap had to be filled. Every month needed a release. Every franchise needed to stay active. Over time, this changed how decisions were made. Instead of asking whether a story needed to exist, the question became whether it could help sustain momentum. That subtle change reshaped Disney's creative instincts. The company began to confuse presence with relevance and output with impact. As this mindset spread, even Disney's internal culture shifted. Creative teams felt pressure to deliver faster rather than deeper. Risk became something to manage instead of something to embrace. Projects were judged by how safely they fit into existing ecosystems, not by how boldly they pushed forward. That environment doesn't kill creativity instantly, it narrows it. Slowly, stories lose their edge. Dialogue becomes familiar. Endings feel predictable. Not because the people behind them lack talent, but because the system no longer rewards courage. This is why the change felt emotional rather than obvious. Disney still looked powerful from the outside. It still dominated shelves, screens, and headlines. But emotionally, something was different. The excitement that once surrounded new releases faded. People watched out of habit rather than curiosity. Parents continued sharing older Disney films with their children because those were the stories they trusted. New releases struggled to earn the same place in memory. The theme parks reflected this shift as well. Financially, they became stronger than ever, driven by higher prices and new monetization strategies. But emotionally, the experience changed. The parks felt less like carefully crafted worlds and more like optimized systems. Guests paid more, planned more, and experienced less spontaneity. The magic wasn't gone, but it felt managed. measured and monetized. And for a brand built on emotion, that distinction matters. Disney's challenge now isn't a lack of resources or talent, it's a question of direction. The company has to decide whether it wants to operate as a machine built to maximize engagement or as a studio willing to protect meaning. Those paths look similar on spreadsheets, but they lead to very different outcomes. One prioritizes speed and consistency. The other prioritizes care, conviction, and belief in the audience. History suggests Disney already knows which path built its legacy. Its greatest moments came when instinct mattered more than data and vision mattered more than certainty. They came from risks that didn't look safe at the time and from stories that were allowed to grow without pressure to justify themselves immediately. In chasing everything at once, Disney blurred that clarity, and until it chooses patience over momentum, restraint over volume, and meaning over presence, the difference will continue to be felt, not as a collapse, but as a quiet distance between what Disney once was and what it has become. What makes this moment so revealing is not what Disney lost, but what it replaced it with. Instinct gave way to process, intuition to layers, and emotional risk to predictable safety. That shift didn't look dangerous at first, it looked responsible. But responsibility without imagination slowly drains meaning from everything it touches. Disney once led culture by setting the tone. Now it often waits to see how the tone will be received. That hesitation shows up in stories that feel cautious and worlds designed to avoid mistakes rather than invite discovery. The result isn't failure, it's something quieter, a brand that still functions, still dominates, but no longer surprises. And surprise is where magic lives. When stories stop surprising, they stop staying. They pass through screens and conversations, not with anger, but with acceptance. And acceptance is not loyalty. That distance between impact and presence is the real challenge Disney now faces. Being everywhere is easy. Making something that stays is harder. And whether Disney finds its way back will be decided not loudly, but quietly, by whether it allows stories to matter again before they're expected to perform.